Oh, why am I like this? On the 1st of August 2024, I decided to buy a month of Xbox Game Pass to see the value I could get after not primarily playing on Xbox for a long time. Now there are a lot of games that are on Game Pass, but I have some of them on my Steam library and I would rather play them there as I'm not getting that money back. I chose a bundle of games that I hadn't played that I either had an interest in or had been told I should play for a long time. Psychonauts always seemed like a weird and wonderful title whenever I saw trailers. The idea of jumping into people's minds and their character and the inner workings crafting the world you navigate through, fighting off enemies with psychic powers, which was kind of a thing back then. A lot of games with psychic combat came out, like Second Sight, Psyops, and you know what? It's not important, we're talking about Psychonauts. Now I'm going to get the negative out of the way real quick, and it isn't really a negative, but more something that makes sense in the game world. It's that 90% of the sidecasts are kids. Obviously you're at a summer camp and we can't do what the Borderlands movie is doing and put 45-year-olds in their place, but it's the white noise that just makes me want to skip dialogue, which isn't something I normally do. But it's this character you meet later on who just reminded me of Bubbles from Powerpuff Girls, and it's the pitch. It kills me inside.
I'm not gonna bring you any more brains if you're gonna be so mean to them!
A fun fact, I googled it and it is actually the same voice actress, so that makes a lot of sense. But that's the only negative from the game, which I feel is really impressive considering everything else that they get right. Controlling Raz through combat and platforming is surprisingly tight considering this game's nearly 20 years old. With all his psychic abilities being earned as you progress through the game, you rarely have any downtime before unlocking the next skill to bolster your arsenal. Fighting fodder enemies really doesn't take that much though, but some of the boss fights follow a more trial and error formula that helps keep things fresh. When you're worming your way inside people's noggins, you stumble across sobbing luggage, aka emotional baggage, which is such an awesome idea. You have to go and find tags to help remove people's emotional baggage, which fills out the video gamey kind of gameplay, but it was such a hilarious and fun way to make me engage with the surroundings. There are also safes, which once you open up a memory presented as a slideshow plays, that has had a lasting effect on them, locked away from everyone. All the mines you'll jump into have unique designs and mirror characters' traits in some shape or form. Exploring a psychedelic 60s dance club filled with people enjoying themselves, bright colourful lights beaming from all angles, and an overwhelming amount of positivity reflects this happy and loving nature of the Agent Vondello. This is completely reversed with the likes of Agent 9, a man of science who comes across emotionally vacant with a very systematic approach to life. His mind feels minimalistic, organised, but sterilised of any vibrancy. You can feel and see the difference between these minds like night and day. It's creative and fun and carries this Saturday morning cartoon kind of vibe, where it doesn't take itself seriously, but adding comedic writing when it does, touching on trauma and different forms of anxiety and mental difficulties in a way that leads to overcoming them, and really displaying this complex nature of someone's psyche, but in a playful, fun way, which leaves room for thought. From recreating King Kong in the mind of a lungfish to battling brain-powered armoured forces, and the Milkman conspiracy being a paranoid mess of a headspace, following up with a collective of asylum patients whose warped minds are ventured and assisted. It was such a great time, and personally I wish I got to enjoy this when it originally came out. But that wasn't the case, and I did eventually get round to beating Psychonauts. The emotional palate cleanser. Warhammer 40k Boltgun is a bombardment on the senses in all the right ways. The combat carries weight with every attack you deliver to the Chaos Faction's horde. You zip around like an unstoppable force of nature, turning everything in your wake to blood and bones. This retro-styled shooter takes you to wonderful battlefields with enemies galore, passes you a chainsword and leaves you to go massacre till your heart's content. Like dropping off a cranky 8-foot tall toddler to have a tantrum on everything that approaches. Normally stories take the backseat in games like this, and that's no different here, with gameplay and music carrying the entire experience. Being a huge fan of Warhammer's universe would help you flesh out a fragmented portion of the timeline, but it's equally accessible to anyone who has never dabbled in the series. No hand-holding, no constant reminders of what you're doing, just you and your arsenal slaughtering through everything that stands in your way. I love this, and I miss it at times because it's refreshing to be left be to go figure out the game these days. Or maybe I just play too many games that try and force me to hold their hand while we cross the busy road of IGN reviews and Metacritic scores. Even though this game has all the curves of that old school boomer shooter you had a crush on when you were younger, it's running on Unreal Engine 4, and this stylistic choice was simply to capture the attention of all the wonderful people who are sick of seeing the entire family tree when looking into the lead character's eyes. Jokes aside, this style goes hand in hand with this kind of gameplay, and I can't fault it for that at all. And it feels like a nod to the boomer shooters that inspired it with its own Warhammer twist. Okay, so I'm gonna have to be careful with what I show of this game for 1, spoilers, but also 2, the fact that this game is graphic at times. I mean, the overall world is not something pleasant, but some areas they really go hard with what they put on display for you to travel through. These lands are barbaric and constantly remind you of this, with corpses strung up for all to see, limbs scattered around the ground or nailed to posts and buildings, which makes seeing peaceful and beautiful vistas a well-deserved breath of fresh air. And this game is stunning, but sadly the beautiful side of this world is lost to time, power and death. A hollow husk of what it was, and what you see is what remains. You continue the story of Senua as she's purposely captured by the Northmen slavers to be taken to where her captured people are. A storm destroys the Northmen's boat, leading to her escape as she's washed up onto the island. This is all I'm going to say about this game's story, as I feel like anyone wants to give the game a go, I'd be robbing you of that experience. The combat is simplistic, with very little demand, but you can change difficulties between your standard easy, normal or hard. But they also have dynamic difficulty, which basically sees how well you're doing and adjusts difficulty. While combat to me wasn't the most important thing, it does help give something to do while jogging around listening to your inside voices get a little too loud. Though it wasn't important, every encounter brings a presence that you are in danger. You aren't a powerful entity that is hacking and slashing through everything to build a style meter. You're a driven woman who is battling through each encounter, picking up physical wounds while internally enduring an overwhelming guilt, pain, and vivid hallucinations caused by her psychosis. Now, the psychosis side of Hellblade comes in two incredibly fleshed out methods with the voices constantly rattling off at you, and I mean at you. Even when helpful, they felt more like someone commanding you do something. And while I'm sure I paid more attention to this method than if I was being asked to remember to parry, it feels like you just don't get a break. Which you don't. Sometimes it's just giving a voice to something you're already thinking, and others it's just straight up berating you for not being enough, being broken or failing to do the right thing. Layers of voices continue to whisper in your head, as if a crowd of different versions of you support or attack your psyche, all while you're trying to push through this hideous land you've ended up on. It gets to the point where it feels almost malicious with how the voices speak at you, an overwhelming flood of venomous statements of internal fears and doubts, weaponizing to chip away at your mental fortitude. I think the easiest way to put it is, it's like degrading and semi-supportive ASMR. Oh, with headphones. Yeah, I personally would recommend playing this game only with headphones. The speaker version is great, but it's such a watered down way to experience the game. The second part of the psychosis is hallucinations. While maybe not as frequent as the voices, they do take the world and give it a warped reality. Some hallucinations are more mild, with areas becoming locked off by abstract spirals until you can complete the mini-game of find the shape. Is the shape the shed? How about the trees? No, it must be the corpses spread out in the shape of a Y. So weird. The dialed up to 11 hallucinations is world bending, as you appear in flashbacks and distorted realms of existence that bring a chill kind of cold to locations that are familiar to Senua. I didn't really praise it, but the game does have incredible audio design, visuals, voice acting, and the combat, while basic, does feel weighty and deliberate, which are two things I want with melee combat. There are powerful moments scattered across the game in these shackled silences that display the voice actor's heights from and to Senua, while other moments are these theatrical set pieces, layered with screams and music collaborating so well to enhance the visual tenfold. Overall, I think this game is fantastic the way that it tackles traumatic emotions and grief while always encouraging you to press forward through that pain instead of avoiding it, showing the strengths and weaknesses of humanity through the aftermath instead of the immediate conclusion. Which is why this kind of sucks to say, it's short. Like, if you take your time with it and explore everything, it can be 11 hours, and that's great. But I feel like nobody is walking everywhere and constantly jogging, which does take the number down, with some people reporting half that time to beat it. It also doesn't have much in the realm of replayability, so for £50 full price it makes it difficult to recommend to someone who wants to own their games. Side note, this game was actually the reason why I chose to make this video. I knew what kind of game Hi-Fi Rush was. I knew it was a hack and slash rhythm game with everything on beat with the world, but I did not realise how awesome a job they did with it. For context, this is Chai, goes and enrolls himself with Project Armstrong, fusing technology with the human body to get a cybernetic arm. With some mysterious plot points, his MP3 player falls into the machine and is perfectly fused to his chest, making the world come alive with music. From the moment you get control of Chai, the world is locked into this audio cue of how to operate in it. I stood still at the beginning in the surgery gown just to watch and listen as Chai bounces his heel off the ground, these robot mechanical movements while it counts boxes on shelves and the thud of the industrial background all syncing with each other. And this is only a taste of what's to come. In the first 5 minutes you learn the rhythm of the game simply by it being a constant background influence. And by the end I found myself loving the sound design way more than I ever expected. As soon as I started collecting important items, I was in awe at the guitar riffs that played, reminiscent of Bill and Ted. Grinning at such a little detail brought me so much joy. Once combat is introduced, you have this steady stream of being taught how best to tackle the variety of different enemies in this game. While specific options are focused later on to deal damage, these are seasonings of the combat, and not primarily how you'll be inflicting damage. It hands a varied amount of different actions that can work into your combos, with upgrades further developing what you can do. The combo system at first glance made me think, oh, I'm going to struggle with this. But I started picking it up and getting decent at the timing of attacks and keeping a steady flow of damage being pushed out while also avoiding being hit. Now, I wasn't great at the combat, but I didn't feel like I was being punished at the same time for not having the timing locked in. Which is amazing, because one of the main reasons I didn't invest in this game earlier was because I felt like I would drop full price on a game and simply suck at it and never get good. The writing of this game is so light-hearted and goofy. Like, Chai's journey is so tropey, with his ability to make a difference, but his selfishness makes him just want to get out of danger's way, until he's put in a position where he has to step up and make things better. I don't know what it is, because I usually find this trope kind of annoying, but I find Chai kind of endearing, with his overall confident nature and his act now think later mentality, paired with love for puns. I normally can't be bothered with character designs like this, but clearly the writers found a way to make it not too much while also making it charming. His character wouldn't stand out as much if he wasn't accompanied by a diverse side cast of individuals that highlight his pros and cons. From early on you know he's a dreamer, and you meet members of his crew that keep his head level and help him grow as a person. It takes time, but you start seeing glimpses of it shine through. Now, there is rarely any downtime without conversation between the team, as Chai is constantly with 808, a robot cat that ends up syncing with your musical chess piece and becoming your indicator of beat timing. This is also how dialogue between Chai and the crew is managed. It's crazy how creative the Tango team was with thinking up stuff like this. I don't really want to give away anything about the sidecast, as personally I think they're well introduced and worth experiencing through the gameplay. Plus this game came out last year. Speaking of character designs, the enemy robots are always looking incredible, and I felt the game didn't run for long enough for it to feel samey. Like, they mix up the encounters and variety of robots through the game to keep it fresh. And the bosses, oh god, the mainline bosses are so cool. Like, I feel like I shouldn't have been invested as much as I was at the end screen of the fight, but man, it looks amazing. The actual personality behind them are also well written. Like, I couldn't stand them, and when they would go on and Chai would interrupt them, it felt like he mirrored my thinking in that moment. I haven't even talked about how awesome the art style is. It's just so colourful with a comic style. Throughout each location, you're greeted with such beautiful bright colours that pop all over the place. It just has so many cool details in plain sight without forcing you to pay attention to them. If you take a moment to take in the details of characters and the world itself, you will be surprised by how much you can easily overlook. Some cutscenes cut between this comic-like style to almost anime-esque vibes, showing the variety of talent at work when they take a monologue moment and flip it on its head with this intense action-focused hype that had me on the edge of my seat. There's even a boss who's just hitting JoJo stances whenever he can squeeze them in, which was such a random thing to see in the game, but just reinforces the example of love and care that Tango Games work put into Hi-Fi Rush. Explaining how much humour and charm this game has brimming under this comic-styled rhythm hack and slasher feels like a task way too long for this video. I will never boast my skills on a game like this, but the hurdles of getting good don't feel so impossible to overcome, and practice would obviously remedy any gameplay difficulties I had. Playing Hi-Fi Rush was an unexpected delight that I personally don't think you can do justice by explaining it. The story is to be experienced through trial and error, the character dynamics are to be adored in the moment, and those stylish freeze frames during boss fights feel incredible when earned. I can without a shadow of a doubt say that Hi-Fi Rush deserved to be in the conversation of Game of the Year in 2023. I was really wishing I wasn't going to have any issues with making this video and playing these games, but there always has to be one that goes and makes it hard, so let's talk about Quantum Break. The team behind Quantum Break, Remedy Entertainment, has been releasing games with these confusing but intriguing narrative experiences, which feed you breadcrumbs of information about the goings-on and whichever setting you're in, sinking its hooks into you, dragging you deeper into the experience while adding more questions to the ever-growing list and few answers crossing them out. You are confused, things don't make sense, and you're thrust into the shoes of a protagonist that shares that confusion. It sounds like a headache, but somehow Remedy work their magic and capture players' attention just enough to the point that they don't want to put the controller down. Or mouse, I guess. So with this said, I was interested in Quantum Break strictly to see how this new story would be twisted, warped, and spoon-fed to me over time. Time powers are the powers you'll have at your disposal through the game, and it hands them to you pretty quickly too. I was surprised how fast I went through firing off a few rounds from a pistol to being able to dash through time, cause some time warps to slow down everything inside, or make a bubble around me that stops bullets. I really love the fact that you can interact with things in the world that will make changes to how the story goes, or branching decisions that affect how the world will react to you. Quantum Break has some pretty big issues which brought my playtime to an end rather early. The game doesn't feel optimized for keyboard and mouse at all, as you have to either over-aim or are dragging behind. I even double checked I didn't have mouse smoothing or acceleration on just to be sure, because it felt so scuffed at times. Performance issues sometimes just plague the simple moments in games. When nothing's happening, the lag was kicking in, and I can only speak on the PC side of things, but I felt like these were both port issues and keyboard and mouse compatibility. I strongly recommend playing on console for this one. Now, sometimes games get a little goofy and the code decides to just jump out the window, but what am I looking at? These blinding colours are windows on the side of buildings, and this one is from a car, and it became unplayable from here on out. It's funny to look at as a haha moment, but it just sucks because I was enjoying the game regardless of the jank controls and the inconsistent stuttering. I did Google to see about a fix, but it seems like this is something that plagues the PC Gamepass version, and playing on Steam would be a smarter choice as you can opt to play on DX11 instead of DX12, which was causing the issue. I added it to my wish list as I got invested in what was going on, and I think it could be a fun time once it goes on sale. This sucks. I really wanted to talk up this game, and I'm sure it'll be a blast to play when I get it on Steam, but this entire video is about Gamepass experiences, and I'm on PC, so I felt I need to share these technical issues. And just in case I said a collective of words that made you want to give the game a go, you are at least aware of some hurdles that pop up that could exist through the rest of your playthrough. I'm mainly gutted about this as the antagonist gets introduced pretty early on and they're well versed in the powers you both have. And while you're learning, it gives that feeling of progressing to become strong enough to defeat them. I will finish this on a positive note though. I am in love with the shattered space and time visuals that the game is constantly dabbling in. Yet another reason to play Quantum Break another time. There was something about Solar Ash that just made me want to play it as soon as I saw it. It was added to the list of games after I started recording, and I think the reason why is the art style. This neon coloured realm of existence popped out to me like an anime waifu storming Normandy, with the beautiful cloudy ground that you glide across to the skies that hang over you. There is always some form of stylish blend of colours that are breathtaking to look at. You take control of Rei, a void runner who's risking it all to save her planet from the Ultra Void, basically a supermassive black hole. And that's all I'm going to say here, as this game is not long and experiencing it blindly is much better than hearing some guy butcher it. Although there are other things I can talk about, like traversal, how Rei is always positioned with a beautiful vista to gaze at while she flows around. It feels floaty, which I normally think is a negative thing, but here it kinda fits. Combat is not some fleshed out mechanic in this title, but I feel like that's part of the charm really. It's simple attacks to fend off a variety of different void creatures while you work your way around, stabbing these eyes until the boss of the area appears. Once the massive anomalies appear, it feels like Shadow of the Colossus but amped up. Like your movement is so much faster, and while working towards doing significant damage to them, you're on a timer to get to the next checkpoint of crucial damage. In no way am I saying it's the same as Shadow of the Colossus, but it follows a very similar path of hunting this larger than life creature as a speck of dust to progress onwards with the story. The art direction was what dragged me into this experience, but the exploration, side stories and understanding what's going on was what kept me till the end. With it being a short experience, I would highly recommend playing through this to unravel the Void Runner story and see what awaits for Rei. Sometimes in life, it's nice to just slow everything down and just enjoy some peaceful time alone. And I felt like that was something Unpacking captured perfectly within its cozy blend of soft music, easy controls and art style simple but detailed enough to always know what the next item out of the box is. Now I've moved around a lot in life, so the idea of packing and unpacking isn't a stressful time for me in the slightest, which I felt the game mirrored that familiar feeling that I've experienced very well. The idea of getting a room and seeing what space you have to work with, what fits where, is this going to be inconvenient on a day-to-day basis, and where did I put my hat? Which somehow always ends up in a kitchen box like 9 out of 10 times. Where you place items has rules of course, like you can't have a kettle in your room to have easy access to your favourite hot beverage, or that console controller, they don't go in the shower, but within the confines of where things would normally go, you can organise and manage them however you wish. Like books for example, I'll always have the biggest on the left working along and getting smaller in size, or how I always have knives, forks and spoons laid out in the kitchen drawer a certain way. Like you might be more invested in making things perfect in your eyes, or not care at all and play the will it won't it fit game till you move on to the next place. Random things I noticed while editing was the fact that the lighting changes as you play, with sunlight shining through the window or outside getting dark. The fact that the first time you move out, the kitchen you unpack in has scuff floors that have creased over and scrape marks where the fridge has been pushed in under the counter. The bedroom has areas on the wall that have clearly been fixed and painted over, leaving these marks, and I didn't realise how accurate this is to the first time you move out. Like I had these experiences the first time I did. Story might be a stretch with this game, but I do love how it tells you what year it is before your new place is revealed to you. so you can see the gaps in time since the last time you had to unpack. With some items standing the test of time and being with you through multiple moves, others were clearly a new hobby that you were trying out that didn't stick till your next move. It's these little details that make it feel like a real person's journey. Like I have things that I've lost along the way through moves and outgrowing, but after playing this I end up searching around my home and reminiscing on when I got them. For example, I have a collection of Halo stories, mangas, comics, lore books, figurines and plushies, and even my original copy of Halo 2, which was bought 20 years ago by the end of 2024, and all of them have survived me moving around. I don't know if I got a unique experience from playing Unpacking or the intended experience. I didn't expect such a peaceful game to have me feeling this way over simply taking things out of a box and putting them in my preferred place. These are just games that I chose to play, but Gamepass gave me more than enough titles to keep me occupied for a month. Indie titles, JRPGs, narrative focus, immersive sims, party games, races, roguelikes, games that will make you laugh and cry, and this isn't even bringing into account all the established titles with multiple entries, and so much more. I picked a few games that I was interested in playing, and I'm sure there's some more gems on Game Pass that I missed, but for a month I got to explore those options and had a blast doing so. I wanted to share my findings because sometimes money gets tight and you can't afford to buy a new game day one, but Game Pass has a huge selection of titles to play for a cheap and affordable price. And if you don't care about owning the game forever, then it's well worth diving in, and who knows, maybe you'll find a game that you wish you had played sooner. For extra bang for your buck, the fact that some games will be accessible day one on Game Pass if Microsoft owns the studio is a godsend if you don't want to splash out on the latest releases. Just try it and see if the title is worth owning. Black Ops 6 released day one on Game Pass, which saw a huge spike in subscriptions to the service, making so much sense as people could play the campaign, zombies and multiplayer for the fraction of the price that month. Thanks for listening. Sometimes I wish I didn't want to own all the games I play, but regardless, I had fun doing this. Just talking about what I got up to for a month and seeing the benefits of Game Pass in full swing. Though I procrastinated way too hard on actually getting this sorted out. This isn't like a sales pitch to get people to convert into the Xbox ecosystem, but just some exposure on how crazy good a deal this can be if you clock a handful of titles you might be interested in. Games get added and removed, but regardless, there are tons of games to experience, which is why I did this. Anyway, I hope you have a lovely day and or evening, and I'll catch you next time.